Hello everybody and welcome to Japan Rank 2! Yay! Now, I know I haven't done one of these videos in a while, and that's just because of a couple of things. One, I kind of just took a break from Warthunder to play more Overwatch and Minecraft with my buddy Ashton, who's on the channel fairly frequently. And, just interests change. I kind of got burned out on it, on War Thunder here, but I still plan on uploading and recording Overwatch gameplay and reviews. So, sorry for the kind of delay in this, but nevertheless, we are here. So, moving on from rank 1 Japan to rank 2 Japan, like most of the other nations in the game, you kind of sort of get into more of what the nation is about, and you get a lot more variety in gameplay gameplay with the Japanese here at rank 2 versus rank 1, because really rank 1 everything is pretty maneuverable. Even the heavy fighters can duke it out sometimes, and the bombers even as well, especially the Key 21. But at rank 2, you get a lot of just flat-out maneuverability. There are a couple of planes here and there, mostly the heavy fighters, and this guy down here, that are more energy fighting, boom and zoom tactics, but that's just how it is. So the first plane you come to at rank 2 is the A6M2N. Now this is going to be the first zero that you get here in the game. Now, it's a battle ranking 2.70. Now, the reason why the zeros are as powerful as they are is because they have in terms of, I guess you could say, more modern monoplane designs. Once you start getting out of biplanes and just these little, dinky toys here, you start getting into more what you expect from different nations. And this is probably the most iconic aircraft for the Japanese. So the A6M2N, it's obviously a float plane, but don't let these floats discourage you. You still have an amazing turn time, and at battle ranking 2.7, having two 20mm cannons with that maneuverability is absolutely astounding. You do also have two of those little 7.7s here in the nose, but it's really the 20mm that you're going to be shooting things down with. Now, they do run out of ammo fairly quickly, kind of like the BF-109s at rank 2. They only have 60 rounds per gun. The trade-off is though you are much more maneuverable than a BF-109. But the BF-109 is climb rate and speed. The A6M2s are maneuverability. Now, what these float planes actually are, or these floats here, are just basic fuel tanks. There's nothing in that one, nothing in that one. These ones out here are for stability, and there is a fuel tank in there. That's kind of the main one here. There are a couple of other fuel tanks in here as well. But if you absolutely wanted to, there is a way you can take these off, and it requires you to land at your airfield, and instead of landing, just kind of skid across the ground until they rip off. Now, you risk damaging your propeller and just smacking straight into the ground, but it is possible. But I don't feel the pontoons hamper this plane all too much. It's still a fairly powerful engine for this light of an aircraft. Then, when you go on to the Army line here, you start off with the Key 43-1 and the Key 43-2. The Key 43-1, really the only difference between the 1 and the 2 is you start off with 7.7mm machine guns, and then you can unlock the Otsu mod, which allows you to have one 12.7 and one 7.7, and then the Hai mod here allows you to have two 12.7mm. You do have a weaker engine as well. Obviously no armor plating here, but you do have kind of a weaker engine. But on this plane here, it's all about the maneuverability. And at battle ranking 1.7, these two 12.7mm Ho H103 machine guns here are pretty decent. They actually have some decent belts to them as well. I believe they've got, yeah, like an air belt. I mostly just use the stealth belt for the immediate action incendiaries. But at this battle ranking, you're going to hit harder than a lot of other aircraft. And the Key 43-2 is basically just the same. You do get a boost in power with the engine, and you do lose a little bit of maneuverability, but that's basically it. You also get this armor plating here behind the pilot, but it's a Japanese aircraft. It's still going to be fairly fragile, but you get a better Key 43 at battle ranking 1.7. Then you move on to the Key 45 Otsu here, and the Key 45 Otsu kind of just goes along the same sort of route as the other Japanese heavy fighters at rank 1. You do move up to battle ranking 2.3 here, and what makes this one unique is that it has a 37mm cannon here with two 50 cals here in the nose. Now, the 37mm cannon only has 16 shots, and it is kind of a slow rate of fire. It's not something like the Air Cobra or the King Cobras or even the Yak 9T's 37mm cannon. This is more of a traditional cannon rather than a faster auto cannon. Now, with this being a heavy fighter at low battle ranking, you really want to stay up at altitude. You really want to target people who are climbing, people who, flying bombers. You really don't want to get into the thick of things with really any heavy fighter because you don't have the maneuverability to keep up with anyone. You have one bit of armor plating back here for the pilot, and kind of crammed fuel tanks together, so your wings should be relatively durable in terms of people shooting at you. But if they do hit right here, there's a high chance of your fuel tanks being set on fire. They are self-sealing compared to the other fuel tanks on other Japanese planes, but being hit in the fuel tank doesn't necessarily mean you're going to survive the fire. I wanted to talk about the gun back there as well. The gun you get back here, I actually want to say that this is a German gun back here because it has that kind of German rate of fire, plus it is a 7.92mm. So I think this is a German gun that they stuck on the back here. It is only the one gun, and it does kind of have a small cone of fire in the back here, but it'll do the trick if you know how to aim with it. But really, when it comes to heavy fighters, gunners, you want to focus more on maneuvering and drawing opponents towards your allies rather than relying on your back gunners, unless they have some sort of amazing gun back there or multiple guns. But other than that, this plane's pretty good. Then we move on to the B5N2. This plane is it's not that great in my opinion. It does have a really nice loadout choice. You can have the 660s or the two 250s or the two 800s or different types of torpedoes. The only problem is that this plane has absolutely no armament on it whatsoever. you got your Type 91, or not Type 91, your Type 92 machine gun back here, and then whatever you pick in terms of your ordnance. That's everything. So no armor. It's a fairly large plane. Uh, this guy, it says it's a gunner, but he's supposed to be a navigator. Unfortunately, if you do have your gunner taken out, he doesn't like replace him or anything, which I think is something that should be implemented into the game. It works for ground forces. If your gunner gets killed, somebody else in the tank replaces him. So why can't you replace the back gunner with somebody else? I don't know. So once again, these fuel tanks are not self-sealing, so you kind of have to watch out in terms of durability. But you're flying Japanese, you really want to watch out being shot anyway. My suggestion is don't fly this thing out, just skip it. The G4M1 is kind of a unique Japanese bomber. Unfortunately, the Japanese bombers do have one thing that's wrong with them, and that's their bomb loadouts. Now, an 800 kilogram bomb isn't that bad, but at the previous plane in the lineup here, the H8K, you get two 800 kilogram bombs. Plus, you get a lot more guns and a lot more armament to defend yourself with. You do have a 20 millimeter cannon in the back here, but he does have a very small cone of fire. Also, you have nobody really facing downward, so planes coming up from behind you and below you, the most common place where a plane is going to approach you from, is completely unguarded. Plus the fact that you have no armor and massive fuel tanks in the wings means that this bomber isn't really something to write home about. Going on to the N1K1, now this one recently just got a battle ranking change. It was at 3.0, but now it's at 2.7, same as the Float Zero. And really what you need to know about this is that it is a better climbing float plane, so I do believe as well this also kind of suffers in maneuverability in terms of Japanese planes, but it's still a Japanese plane. It's still very maneuverable. Like I said before, that main pontoon there is just a fuel tank. You can rip this off if you want to. I think I have a video where it shows me tearing off the pontoons there and then using this plane as just a normal plane. It does look pretty nice when the pontoons are off of it, but the pontoons aren't that dampering or that big of a hindrance to you. Once again, you do have the 20 millimeter cannons here with the two 7.7s. With these ones, though, you have 100 rounds per gun versus 60 rounds per gun, so you can be a little bit more liberal with the trigger. You do have that one bit of armor plating in the back here, and several smaller fuel tanks here in the wings that are self-sealing, but it's a Japanese plane. You really want to make sure that you are maneuvering out of people's gunfire rather than trying to tank it. Then moving on to the Ki 44 and the Ki 44 Hai. The Ki 44-1 is an interesting plane because it's the first sort of Japanese plane that doesn't really perform that well in terms of the turn fighting. It is very capable of doing that, but with a 5,628 feet per minute climb rate, you really want to be booming and zooming in this plane. Now, the unfortunate bit is that it really doesn't have a boom and zoom armament. It has two 50 cals here in the wings and then two 7.7s in the nose. There's no armor plating, and that's your internal loadout. Kind of everything's cramped together with the 7.7s up in the nose here and then the 50 cals here in the wings. This plane is capable of shooting things down. It's just you need to stay on a target a bit longer. And most of the time when you're at altitude, you're going to be shooting at bombers a lot. And since you're starting to move up the battle ranking system, Uh, this thing takes a while to take down a Catalina, for example, unless you get lucky. But this is remedied with the second one, so unless you particularly like the Key 44s, I would just stick to the second one, which is the Key 44 High. The only big difference is it gets the armament buff of having the 2 in the nose here as well as the 2 in the wings. It also, I believe, has like a shorter wingspan here. Just as kind of a comparison here, the first one. Yeah, those wings are a little bit longer on this one than the Key 44 High. The Key 44s are also fairly fast aircraft for Japanese. That's kind of something you pay for when you fly Japanese aircraft. Is they're kind of sluggish. They're not the fastest things in the world. They're definitely not going to be left behind a lot of the time. It's just at the start of a game, unless you're diving down right from the beginning, you're going to be kind of the second wave of fighters that comes in. Obviously, there's exceptions like the Key 44s here that do have a very nice top speed and with an amazing climb rate. With the 450 cals here, it's kind of like flying the Brewster Buffalo at Battle Ranking 2.0. But with this one, you do have to keep reminding yourself that you really don't want to stay on the tail of anything with a tail gunner for very long because it is a Japanese aircraft. It is very fast. It's very good at booming and zooming and climbing. It's just the armament is something that you do need to be kind of concerned about because it is only the 450 cals. It's better than the previous one, but just keep that in mind as you're going after targets. You might have to take a couple of passes rather than just staying on someone's tail. Then moving on to the Key 45 Tay. This one's actually fairly interesting because it's the first plane that introduces these top-mounted cannons here. Now, the cannons up here, they're two 20mm cannons. The purpose of these cannons was that you would fly underneath a bomber and then you would change your view to these guns here, and there's a gun sight here on top in the cockpit that the pilot will look at, and these cannons will fire up at about a 45-degree angle. Now, whether the effect of this in game is very unlikely. Unless you get at that exact angle, most of the time you're just going to want to point your main armament, which is this forward-firing 37mm cannon. Unfortunately, that is your only forward-facing armament, and like I said before, these cannons are not super fast-firing like on the Air Cobras and King Cobras. These ones are fairly slow. And at a low battle ranking here, most things you're going to be shooting at are very nimble, and once they see that first shell pass by, they're going to want to do nothing with you, and they're going to dodge and weave in and out of you. This plane does have some ground targeting capabilities. That's mostly what I use it for. I just use the 37mm high explosive cannon here to take out AA guns, machine guns, armored cars, and then I use the 250s for a pillbox or something. Unfortunately, because this is a heavy fighter and not a ground attacker, those bombs do take absolutely forever to reload. So I unfortunately would have to say also kind of skip over this plane just because the two 20mm cannons here, which you can control, you just have to go into the settings and bind it because they are not binded by default. This plane's kind of a gimmick. It's a very pretty plane. It has a nice 37mm cannon for ground attacking. I wouldn't say it's very good at shooting at air targets unless whatever you're shooting at is very slow, which is kind of what this thing was built for. It was built to shoot down bombers. Same gun in the back as the previous heavy fighter. kind of that smaller cone of fire and something you really shouldn't rely on. But I would say I would skip over this personally. That's what I did. It's sad that such a nice looking plane unfortunately has this gimmick where the 20s are facing up at a 45-degree angle versus in the nose more traditionally. Then you get to a actually decent little ground attacker, the D4Y1. Now these are relatively recent planes added into the game. They have been around for a little bit, but in terms of Japanese, they are still fairly new. Unfortunately, Warthunder doesn't like adding a lot of Japanese planes. Mostly the Germans and the Russians, and the Americans kinda get all the love in terms of adding aircraft into the game. So these guys are still relatively new. Now, in terms of armament, you do have two 7.7mm machine guns for your ground strafing. I wish it had something else, because at battle ranking 2.7, you could be flying an A-20. You could be flying a B-34. It's just sad that the Japanese ground attackers aren't as hard-hitting as the Americans or the Germans. The bomb loadout's fairly simple. You either get a 250 or a 500. Obviously go with the 500. You do have one gun in the back here, but like I said before, it's not a very decent gun. It has kind of a weird cone of fire, and I would suggest relying more on your maneuverability and flying towards allies to get fighters off your tail rather than relying on this gun back here. It has absolutely no armor protection whatsoever, and the wings are absolutely filled with fuel tanks. Then you move on to your first Key 49. The Key 49s are a little bit better than the previous bomber in the lineup here, just because first off you get a gun that faces down and behind you. Unfortunately, it is only a 7.7mm machine gun. It's not a 50 cal. It's not a 20mm. You do get one 20mm here, which is nice, and that is able to fire straight back if somebody is sitting directly on your 6. You also get this weird, I want to say double-barreled. It looks like it's double-barreled. This Type 89 machine gun back here. It's like a MG 81 kind of, where it's firing two at the same time. Unfortunately, though, it is plagued by the same problem that most of the Japanese bombers have, and that's a very lackluster bomb loadout. This one only carrying a single 500 kilogram bomb. If you want a bomb, stick with the Russians, stick with the Germans, stick with the Americans, and maybe the British, if you could tolerate their guns. But they at least have really nice bomb loadouts. The Japanese, if you absolutely must stick with bombers, stick with the H-8Ks, both here and here. And I'll talk about this guy here in a second once we're done with everything in the normal tech tree. Then you get an A6M2 Mod 11. This is your first proper zero, and it shows. You jump up from battle ranking 2.7 to 3.3. This plane is absolutely lethal. It's one of those planes that biplanes fear this thing. And it's just sad that a lot of people think, oh, it's just a zero, I can outturn it. No. Most of those guys that think that way are in Spitfires. This thing eats Spitfires for breakfast. The only downside is, though, that you do have only 120 of those cannon rounds here in the wings. So you will be reloading fairly often in arcade. And you're a Japanese aircraft. You will crumple if anything hits you. This thing is literally the definition of a glass cannon. But it is so awesome. I absolutely love this thing. Then you get the A6M2, which is just a more, I guess you could say, proper Zero than the proper Zero. It kinda has the exact same stats. The only difference being this one, I think, is a bit more powerful. Let's see, that's 938 brake horsepower. And this one is 938. Yeah, it's the exact same engine. I'm actually going to pull it up here on my... just see what the stat changes are. The A6M2 Mod 11 climbs slightly better. I don't know why this gets bumped from 3.3 to 3.7. I don't know. Well, you know, a jump from 3.7 to 3.3 isn't too bad. So you could keep them both in a lineup fairly comfortably. But yeah, A6M2. It's another Zero. You're going to be seeing this a lot where it's just another Zero. It's not a bad thing. It means you can have a lineup completely filled with Zeros. It's just, it gets a little boring after a while. You want some variety. And that's tier 3. And then we go on to the Key 61s. Now the Key 61s here in Warthunder play a lot like the BF-109s. Not this one, because I barely have anything unlocked for it. But that is a abysmal climb rate. Holy cow. Is the other one that bad? Because I have the other one fully spaded out. Oh yeah, that's a bit better, but ugh, that's weird. But the Key 61 Co. It's kind of like the Key 44, only worse. And you go up a battle ranking. Now, mind you, this one isn't fully upgraded, but it kind of plays, unfortunately, like a watered-down BF-109. Except you don't have the cannons, you don't have the speed, and you don't have the climb rate. But you have all the downsides of the BF-109. You have one piece of armor behind the cockpit, and everything's kind of tucked together, but like I said, it's a Japanese plane. Anything that hits this thing will absolutely destroy it. So, skip this plane and go on to the Key 61 Otsu. Because this plane actually does play like a BF-109. It plays like a BF-109E1, which does not explain why it has a 2.3 battle ranking. It does have a decent turn time. It is Japanese, but at the same time, this is meant to be more of the boom and zoom style. It does have the capability of carrying some ground ordnance, but this is meant to be a high-altitude booming and zooming aircraft. The Key 61 Otsu is also in the American tech tree. Oh my gosh. I'm messing up. Right here. the Ki 61 1B. This is literally the exact same aircraft. Oh, now it's getting kind of slow. Let her load. Alright, there you go. So, Ki 61 Otsu's not too bad. Does have that 450 cals versus the Ki 61 that just had the 250 cals in the wings and the two 7.7s in the nose. If you do want to keep a low tier Ki 61, keep this one. Then you move on to possibly one of the most lovely aircraft that the Japanese have to offer, the Ki 100. The Ki 100 is basically a Ki 61 with a radial engine in it. Now, this radial engine was less powerful, but more reliable. It does not show that in-game. In-game, this thing is incredibly powerful. It has an amazing climb rate. It has a pretty decent turn rate. This is the jack of all trades, master of none Japanese fighter. It also hits like the Dickens because it has two 20mm cannons and two 12.7mm machine guns. Funny thing is, I just messed that up because the 20mm cannons are actually in the nose. Yeah, you get the 20mm in the nose. You don't get that until you get to the Ki 43 Otsu at rank 3. But this is a very, very nice fighter. Ever since this thing was added into the game, it came in with a 3.3 battle ranking, and then it got bumped to 3.7, and now it's at 4.0. So this plane is definitely something you want to watch out for, both when you're flying against it and flying it yourself, because you do jump fairly high up into the battle rankings, especially for a rank 2 aircraft. It's basically the Japanese Focke-Wulf 190, even though the Japanese already have a Focke-Wulf 190. Then you go to the Ki 45 Hai. Now the Ki 45 Hai is more like the traditional Japanese heavy fighters. It still has that 137mm cannon down here. The only other thing is that instead of having machine guns in the front or cannons on the top, it has a single 20mm cannon here in the nose. Actually, that's the 37mm cannon. The 20mm cannon's all the way the heck back here. That's odd. I could have swore that was the other way around. But, same piece of armor, same loadout on the inside. It's just with these Ki 45s, everyone's just going to have a little bit of an armament difference. Plus it also has... Wait, USA. This thing has an American camouflage. If it'll load. Hey, look at that. You want to fly as the Americans? There you go. But yeah, so... The Ki 45s, they're kind of all the same. Unfortunately, I would say just stick with the Ki 45 Otsu or the Ki 45 Hai, which is weird because you can have them in the exact same battle ranking lineup. But it's whatever. Ki 45s are unfortunately kind of meh. I mean, they're good for what they are, but they're nothing like the Ki 45 Ko and the J1N1. It's until you get to the Ki 102 where things get really, really interesting in terms of Japanese heavy fighters. But that's at rank 3, and we'll talk about that a different day. Then you move on to the next Japanese ground attacker, the D4Y2. My, doesn't that look familiar? This one, the only difference is that you can put on rockets and have one different bomb loadout where you have a 250 and 260s. I guess those rockets make this thing more like 3.0. unfortunately, these ground attackers are not that great. The Japanese, sadly, don't have that great in terms of ground attackers. In my opinion, the best one is the D3A1 at rank 1. Because it has a decent little bomb loadout, it's very maneuverable for what it is. And it has, well, it looks nice. It's not even that great, but it's, in my opinion, one of the best Japanese ground attackers, tier for tier. The best one, in my opinion, is the B7A2 at rank 3. But I'll talk about this guy a different day. Then you move on to the Key 43, or Key 49. Sorry, you're going to see this Key 43, Key 44, Key 2. You're going to see that a lot. Unfortunately, it's more of the same problems. You do get a bit of an armament upgrade, mostly concerning with your back gun here. I believe that is a 50 cal now? Nope. Well, it's an MG15. It's a German fast-firing gun, but that's kind of it, unfortunately. It's still the same bomb loadout. It's still very lacking. It's not a bomber I would recommend flying all that much, unfortunately. Again, stick with the H-8Ks if you want to fly Japanese bombers. Then, in my opinion, one of the best Japanese fighters, if not the best Japanese fighter at rank 2, that's not the Key 100. Not the Key 100. The key word is not the Key 100. Is the J2M2. Now, the J2M2 is the high-altitude beast. This thing has an absolutely insane climb rate. This thing is even better at climbing than the Germans. This thing can outclimb a F-109 or a BF-109 or an FW-190 like nothing. At this battle ranking of 3.3, any plane you fly out and you look up, chances are you're going to see a J2M2 at 25,000 feet. And with those guns on there, having two 20mm cannons, it wrecks. It unfortunately doesn't have much of protection. It does have some armored glass, but that's only like right in the front. This thing is fairly fragile. It's a Japanese aircraft. But it is extremely quick. It is extremely good at climbing. This is one of the highlights of Japanese planes at rank 2. This and the Key 100 and the Zeros really make this nation at rank 2 awesome. Not too bad in the maneuverability department either, but why would you want to turn in this thing? You could just out-climb and outrun absolutely anything. This thing is amazing. Then the last one, in terms of non-premiums, is the D4Y3 Co. Now, it does change up a little bit by the fact it now has a radial engine instead of an inline engine. It does also have bombs on the wings, which does improve its ground attack capabilities a lot. It's sad that you have to wait this long for a half-decent Japanese ground attacker, and you have to go all the way to 3.3 from 1.3 to have a chance at being a decent ground attacker. You do have a very nice back gun back here, a 13mm machine gun. So basically a Japanese 50 cal. But like I said before, it's only the one gun. It's still a fairly fragile aircraft, so I would not recommend standing still. But in terms of Japanese ground attackers, this isn't too bad. I just wish that it would have an armament upgrade in the front. I'm getting sick and tired of these 7.7s on my ground attackers. But when you're flying the Japanese, you mostly want to do the fighters. The fighters are the best part about the Japanese. Until you get to the higher rankings where you get the B-782 and some of these other bombers here and there, but you want to stick with the fighters. If you don't mind just flying fighters, I would say stick to the Japanese. They're a great nation for supporting fighters. Then in terms of premium, you get a captured Corsair, an F4U-A1. It's a Corsair. It's good at climbing, it's blindingly fast, and it has 6 American 50 cals. In realistic, when you fly against the Japanese, you are bound to see one of these guys, and it throws a wrench into your plans. Because when you think Japanese, you're like, oh, I'll just out-climb them, and then I'll just dive on them. I'm not going to turn fight with them. But then you see a Corsair in the enemy team, and you're like, crap, now I need to figure out how I'm going to outmaneuver and well, you can outmaneuver this thing, but you can't outrun it. This thing will hunt you down. But I guess that's the benefit to having captured planes as premiums. They kind of throw in a different playstyle for a nation that is known for maneuverability. This thing, it's a lot of fun. It's a Corsair. If you like the Corsairs, you'll like this one. Then you get the Bf-109 E7. Now the E7 is actually unique. The customization. There we go. Now the Bf-109 E7, there's actually 2 of them. There's one here as a Japanese premium, and then there's one as a German premium. The E7s are a lot like the E3 and the E4, but it's basically just got a small performance upgrade in terms of its engine. It climbs a heck of a lot better than the other ones. I'm over-exaggerating it a little bit. Maybe not as much, but it's a low-tier Bf-109. It's got the 2 20mm cannons in the wings and then the 2 machine guns. If you like the Bf-109s in the German check tree, mostly these 2 guys here, there we go. Mostly these 2 guys here, the E3 and the E4. It's basically like flying those, except you get a pretty little Japanese camouflage with it. Not test flight, Dylan. There you go. So, this plane isn't a captured, because obviously Germans and Japanese were allies during the Second World War. It was basically just kind of the lines of the Japanese just got one of these just because Germany sent one to them. Just kind of like for testing, I guess, or something like that. I don't know the historical significance behind a Japanese Bf-109, but again, it throws a wrench into your plans when you're fighting off this thing in realistic and you face off against a Japanese team. Then you get a unique Key 44. Now, what's unique about this Key 44 is that it has absolutely dumb armament. Every nation has at least a few planes with absurdly large guns. These have 2 40mm cannons, plus 2 12.7mm machine guns. Now, the reason why I'm going to take this out into the test flight is because I'm going to show the massive disadvantage to these 40mm cannons. They do have a nice rate of fire, actually. As you can tell, the machine gun's in the nose there. You're going to be using these guns a lot after I show you what happens with the 40s. So, I'll actually reload these guns here, and I'll just show you the 40s going off. It's a very slow, very lobbing rate of fire. It's a very hit and miss kind of thing. And now you're out of ammo. You only get 20 rounds per gun. So while, yes, these guns are very lethal. It's just you need to get very, very close in order to hit somebody with them because they have a very slow trajectory. Slow trajectory with a very slow muzzle velocity. You're ending up going to have to use these 12.7s a lot here. And because the 40s are so large, you are going to have a long reload. I just passed 20 seconds on these things. So, it's kind of a one-trick pony. It flies the exact same as the other Key 44s. It's just in this one, in my opinion, it's kind of a novelty plane. They just kind of, I feel like Gaijin threw it in there. It's just kind of like to humor the Japanese players a bit by giving them a plane with absurdly large guns. I mean, every other nation has one, right? Why not the Japanese? Then the Key, I already said the Key. The H8K3, which is a upgrade to the H8K2, by its armament upgrade. It still has the two 800-kilogram bombs. It just now has a turret here in the back, kind of facing downward. I think that's also a... yeah, it's a 7.7. It also has this guy here, that with two guns is kind of like armpit guns for the under the wings here. But this and the other H8K are going to be your primary source of Japanese bombing. While it is a Japanese aircraft and it will catch fire a lot, it does have some really nice guns to it. Then, the last plane, the Key 102. The Key 102, this plane I don't understand. It has a lower battle ranking, yet it outperforms the Key 100. I don't know. Maybe it's because it is a premium plane and it has less playtime than the other Key 100, because they do the battle ranking based off of the performance of the aircraft. So I'm thinking maybe because this plane hasn't flown out as much as just the regular Key 100, maybe that's why it's at 3.7. If you absolutely want just one Japanese premium, get the Key 100 too. You get the flight performance of one of the best Japanese planes in the game at a lower battle ranking than the Key 100. It has the exact same armament, 220s, 250s. Same armor plating, same internal layout. It's just this one it's just better, but at a lower battle ranking. Anyway, guys, I know it feels like I kind of rushed through this here. That's because I didn't want to spend an hour of your time. I'm already getting close to 50 minutes on this. So, if you have any questions or comments or anything, be sure to let me know, and I'll try to reply as quickly as I can. The Japanese at rank 2 is definitely one of my favorite little pockets of planes here. It's just unfortunate that the heavy fighters are kind of lackluster. The bombers are just absolutely terrible. And the ground attack aircraft are... It's actually kind of funny because the fighters here are really good. Heavy fighters, they're kind of meh. Ground attackers, they leave a lot to be desired. Bombers, absolutely terrible. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching, and I hope you have a great day.